welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. And of course, every day you sit down and you look at the news and you watch the news. I can't think our heads go on tilt that are things that corrupt, really? Well, every day we get exposed to things and just kind of puts our brain on tilt. And there are layers to this that are quite frankly staggering. And I've been looking forward to our special guest today. His name is Scott Walter. He is the president of the Capital Research Center and the author of Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. That's the subtitle to the book. Mr. Walter has also served in the George W. Bush administration as special assistant to the president for domestic policy, and was vice president at the Philanthropy Roundtable and editing Philanthropy magazine. And he has written for and has been quoted in such outlets as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and Chronicles of Philanthropy. He does have a website, capitalresearch.org. And there's a picture of the landing page and previously the picture of the book. So a lot to take in. Mr. Walter, good to see you, friend. How are you?
Great to be with you, Perry.
Thanks for your time. Where are we talking to? Where are you?
I'm in Washington, D.C.
Well, we'll forgive you.
Well, I live in America outside the Beltway, but the office is not far from the White House.
Okay, good. Thanks for your time. We value it greatly. Lot to talk about. Wow. What is Arabella?
Well, the single best word would be network, okay? And it's a network of for-profit and nonprofit groups that serves the pleasures of virtually all the left-wing billionaires. Those you've heard of, like Zuckerberg and Gates and Soros, and those you probably haven't, like Pierre Omidyar and Hans-Jörg Wyss.
Wow. So you delve into this. Were you shocked in your investigation?
Well, we've been studying Arabella since about 2018. We were the first place ever to uncover this enormous multi-billion-dollar operation. And so we learn new things every week, but I'm pretty jaded at this point.
Okay. So is there a open coalition of these billionaires? I mean, are they buddies with an agenda?
There certainly are a lot of agendas going on. How much they talk to each other, I'm not in those conversations, so I couldn't tell you how much that happens, but certainly Arabella helps to coordinate the work of lots of them.
Okay, so they have a lot of money, they contribute a lot of money. Maybe you can put some numbers to it. How much are they raising and where does it go?
Sure. To show you what a big operation this is, think of the 2020 election cycle. So that's 2019 and 20. The nonprofit side of Arabella for those 2 years took in $2.4 billion. That was $1 billion more than the RNC and the DNC combined. Now, in the 22 cycle, you would think, well, that's an off year, so surely the money went down. Nope, it went up from $2.4 billion to $3 billion.
Okay, and where's it going?
Well, any question that has Arabella in it, the answer is going to have everything in it, right? So virtually every lefty billionaire is giving them money. And by the way, don't forget the billionaires with a bunch of them with all the same last name, Foundation, like Ford and MacArthur and whatnot.
Okay.
But where it goes is also everything left. There's virtually no issue area where Arabella is not engaged, whether it's forcing boys into girls' sports, or abortion, or population control, or environmentalism, on down the line.
In your research, Scott, did you sense that it's being done legally, or is there some laundering going on?
Well, there's not a lot of hard evidence of illegality, but at the same time, nonprofit law is very complicated. And so if everything, in fact, were being done legally, they would have to be very buttoned down and careful to cross every T and dot every I. And they're being sued by a black woman who accuses them not only of treating her in a racist way, but also of violating nonprofit laws. Now, that case is continuing, but the documents that have come out in that case already make it look like they were absolutely not operating in a button down way. The gist of what she was accusing them of is that they had a 501c3 charity that was controlling an outside 501c4 political nonprofit. And charities are not allowed to control political nonprofits. So we shall see where that ends up.
Well, that in itself is a biggie. I mean, I manage a nonprofit organization, 501c3, and we're scrutinized to death.
Yes.
You know, and yet I don't see that same kind of scrutiny for 501c4s.
No, and the C4 groups, which for your listeners, that's groups like the National Rifle Association or the League of Conservation Voters. Those are the original meaning of dark money. That's when the term was coined. That's what it was used to refer to. Now it sort of refers to all sorts of things.
Let me do a sidebar here just for a moment, Scott. In your research, and maybe just in your own interest, I'm curious why these people, these billionaires, started out as capitalists and then fund things that are anti-capitalist. It just kind of puts your brain on tilt. What happened?
Well, of course, unlike Woody Allen's friend who cheated on his metaphysics exam by looking into the soul of the kid next to him, I can't say I've gotten inside their heads, but I get that question a lot, so I think about it. And I think the first of all, remember, not every billionaire does do that, right?
Right.
So, for instance, Bernie Marcus was one of the guys who became a billionaire because he started Home Depot. Well, he put his money into conservative causes. So it doesn't automatically happen that way. But I think when it does happen, that the problem is control, right? St. Augustine had that great Latin term, libido dominandi, lust for power or control. And that's a permanent temptation. And I think the answer is that the Soroses of the world, they want more and more and more control, and they're never satisfied.
Is it control or buying good feeling?
Well, you're right. I think sometimes it's just the virtue signaling. And by the way, this is a critical religious question, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't find a lot of deeply faith-filled billionaires pulling this kind of nonsense, right? Soros is an atheist. And when you're an atheist, and maybe all of us have sinned, right? And it's certainly fair to say he has. So maybe part of it as well is you're trying to purge your conscience, right, by buying virtue signaling.
Yeah, because I think sometimes if a foundation selects to support whatever organization it decides to do, and that donation is significant, not only are they buying influence, but they're buying pride.
No. It's totally true. And let's remember, for instance, there's the family that's behind Hobby Lobby, right, who fought some of the Obamacare fights. Well, they're not acting this way,
Right.
but the Soroses or the Pierre Omidyars and whatnot, they're going to fund left-wing stuff. And the second you do that, right, you're going to have Chuck Schumer gushing over you. You're going to have the New York Times and NBC gushing over you.
Okay. Do you sense they have been exposed and that exposure is beginning to unwind their agenda?
Well, we shouldn't get too far ahead of ourselves, right? I mean, I don't think old Georgie's going to be funding you anytime soon.
Yeah.
By the way, he'll fund some he'll fund left-wing evangelical groups like Sojourners. But I don't think you should be waiting for any donations. Having said that, the way Arabella works is it really is a Wizard of Oz operation. And think back to that great movie, right? At the beginning, Dorothy sees the wizard. He's big, he's scary, and he affects her behavior a lot. right? But then when the curtain gets pulled and you see it's just some old guy at a microphone, well, that ruins the magic, right? So now Dorothy's not so intimidated by him. And when people like you let people like me explain this stuff to the public, that's some pulling the curtain back. Although in this case, it's going to be a 20 something at a computer terminal in DC,
Yeah.
not an old man at a microphone.
Are NGOs part of this problem?
Sure. Well, keep in mind, NGO just stands for non-governmental organization, or what Americans would call nonprofits. We call them at Capital Research Center, we call them BGOs, basically government operations, because a lot of the left-wing ones get a lot of their money from the government. In fact, over 35,000 nonprofits in America get most of their money from government. So that's not a non-governmental organization, is it?
No. So I guess with the cutbacks and exposure and USA Aid and others that we're starting to see the fraud of some of this and how it works, how threatening are these cuts to these NGOs?
I know exactly the answer to that, because just a few days ago, I was testifying to the House Judiciary Committee, right? Actually, to a subcommittee of it, its tiniest little subcommittee, about the federal funding of lefty nonprofits. And it's only, as I said, the subcommittee, but the full committee's ranking member, right? Jamie Raskin, very powerful, very important Democrat. He was there at that little subcommittee hearing, and everything time he opened his mouth, he said, the hearing is a waste of time. This is a nothing burger. There's nothing going on here. There's nothing important. And of course, he was sitting there for every second of that hearing about, should we be cutting those federal gravy train cash? So his presence belied what he was saying. If it was unimportant, he wouldn't have been there. So indeed, the left is terrified that the Trump administration is going to cut their funding, and the Congress is going to cut the funding of these nonprofits that soak up your tax dollars, to go fight for abortion in Guatemala or something ridiculous like that.
Wow. I'm going to come back to the billionaires' corporations. And if I have the protocol correctly, so whatever the company is, they made a lot of money doing something from some capital investment. And that capital investment proved to be very profitable. And then they give money to a foundation that they form, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Have you noticed, are there members of the corporate board, members of the foundation board?
You sometimes will see that happen. You're certainly right. And obviously, for instance, in the case of the Gates Foundation, well, Bill Gates runs the Gates Foundation, and he also, of course, controls a whole network of for-profit operations.
Isn't that, well, it would look on the surface to be a conflict of interest, but I guess it wouldn't be. If you found the foundation to give money away, it's your business, right?
No, that's true. And those conservative billionaires that I mentioned, they have charitable entities that they're on the board of, as well as their for-profit businesses that they've been on the board of.
Where I'm going with this, Scott, I'm trying to figure out at what point do their corporate savvy weigh in that they give money to something that has no ROI.
Well, but see, this is the thing. So it is not automatic, right? Yeah. The good folks at Hobby Lobby, or Home Depot or whatever, they're doing charitable things, right, with their money, right, with their charitable money, right? So it's not automatically bad, but the thing is that we have to remember, some big businesses will get in bed with big government, right? And of course, government's the best way to, if you've got lust to control and lust for power, well, government's where you're going to go, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to understand that it's not a process problem that somebody made money in a business. That's not automatically a problem. Okay. What is the problem is when you're giving money into the left-wing, anti-American, anti-Israel, anti-Judeo-Christian kind of work.
I want to come back and zero in on that. Let me say to our viewers and listeners a couple of things. Check out his website, capitalresearch.org. There's the picture of the landing page. And certainly get a copy of the book that really kind of takes us completely through this, called Arabella and the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. And you can check out the book as well. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Wow, what an honor to have with us today Mr. Scott Walter. He is the president of the Capital Research Center and the author of a fascinating book called Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. There's a picture of the cover of the book on the screen. He does have a website, capitalresearch.org. He has served with George W. Bush administration as special assistant to the president for domestic policy. And he's been involved in all types of philanthropy himself. And you'll see him, and he's been quoted in and writes for New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and the Chronicles of Philanthropy. Wow, Scott, there's so much here. You're fascinating. I just want to ask a very direct question for a moment. Is Arabella anti-Christian?
Well, I think the answer is they are pro-seducing Christians. Arabella, folks will remember, was Winthrop's ship that came to America, right? Mm-hmm. And what year did it leave for America? 1630, and they have a 1630 fund. They also have a Hopewell fund, and Hopewell was another ship of the Puritans coming to America. So it was started in 2005, and around that time, there was a really big effort to try to seduce evangelicals into, I believe the buzzword was creation care, which is to say they wanted to seduce evangelicals to support a left-wing environmentalist agenda. So I think those are the reason those names got chosen. So, but of course, I would argue that radical environmentalism is deeply anti-human and anti-Christian and anti-Jewish. So they don't publicly attack Christianity, but I don't think that they are at all following what you would probably call a biblical worldview.
Yeah, and I just want to be simple about that, because at the end of the day, when we look at this, you kind of ask yourself, what is the agenda? If the agenda is to create an utopian America or worldview that doesn't allow for the transcendence of an almighty, then they're in control.
Yes, well, and there is nothing that they do that decentralizes power, right? They are not trying to make your local church, your local neighborhood, your local government more powerful. Mm-hmm. They are trying to draw all power to Washington, D.C., and run roughshod over your local school or church or neighborhood. For instance, one of the things they've been very important in is the insane effort to shove boys into girls' sports, which, by the way, that's not a Republican or Democrat issue. 70-80% of America is opposed to that. And it was a big issue in the election, this last election. And yet they were pioneers in fighting for the other side. How
much of a blow is the removal and exposure of DEI to these corporations?
Well, it's a very powerful and important thing, both in corporations and in schools, from K-12 to undergraduate and postdoc, right? All of the commanding heights of culture, alas, have been captured by the left. And so the DEI is their favorite moral justification for their leftism, that America is bad and all left-wing causes are good.
So how would you explain the pushback in America saying, no, we don't want this?
Well, this is the great irony. About 3/4 of Americans agree with at least 3/4 of what you and I believe. So the problem is that lots of Americans don't know that. uh, that they don't know which side is actually on their side. And to be fair, ordinary people have ordinary lives. They got to make a living. They got to raise their kids. They got to worry about their business. They don't have time. I spend my days studying what all these lefties are doing, but that's because I get paid to. Normal people don't know much about that. That's why the left is always obsessed with censorship and controlling the means of communication, right? They want to have gatekeepers like the New York Times or PBS or NPR, and et cetera, or have Zuckerberg and Facebook censoring you.
So I'm still kind of hung up on something here, Scott, so roll with me. I mean, you're the pro here, and you're fascinating. I want to get you back. But let me ask you this. I'm trying to process in my brain why, how they are handling the fact that no matter what their agenda is, and they have the money to push that agenda, that it's being rejected by America, especially with the second election of Trump.
Well, as I said, they are in bed with the left-wing billionaires. They are the servants of the left-wing billionaires. In fact, they were even in the paperback version that just came out this week. You'll see the evidence, which we had not realized earlier. They literally sold the Arabella company to a billionaire family. So, they exist to be the servants of those folks. And so they're going to serve the agenda that those folks are pushing, those billionaires are pushing. They don't care what you or I think. You're not giving them money.
No, I understand. And I will say one thing about the left. They get an A in blaming us for what they're doing. I mean, they really got that figured out.
They do. Plus, what you have to love is, so they enact some stupid policy, right, that's completely upside down, and terrible things happen. And then they demand more government control, more money, in order to fix the problem that they caused in the first place, which, of course, only makes it worse still. And, it's a never-ending cycle. I mean, homelessness is a great example of this, right? They're going to fix homelessness. Well, wait a minute. You spent billions of dollars, and now we have more homeless.
Well, look at it. Look at education. I mean, we're at the bottom of the heap globally. All right, let me take you off subject just for a moment, because given who you are and your background, this unraveling of the story that's broke now by the Intelligence Department of President Obama colluding with his staff from the time he was still president and President Trump becomes president, and the execution of the Russia hoax on the American people in hopes that they could either damage them or take them out. What's your take on this? I mean, do you think this has legs, this story?
I certainly think that it has legs because, again, I don't think the average American begins to understand just what an outrageous scandal the whole Russia hoax was. And by the way, we have another website that I'd urge your viewers to look at, influencewatch.org.
Okay.
And if you look up Russia hoax there, we document the entire network of persons and groups and federal agencies that were genuinely hoaxing the American public for years. And by the way, speaking of Americans who are ignorant of exactly what's going on, the lefties still believe the Russia hoax.
No, I do that. The polls show that. So does this, I don't know where this is going to go. It's exposed now. Tulsi Gabbard said late last night more evidence is coming out that pretty much secures the problem here. Where does this go? Does it go to the Judiciary Committee for investigation? Is it possible that there is criminal charges filed here? Where does this go?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, so I don't trust myself to give you the legal advice exactly what may be going on. Having said that, Pam Bondi is a very impressive attorney general. So one has hopes that if the Tulsi Gabbard material is strong enough, that the Justice Department might finally bring some accountability to the just outrageous things that were done. Having said that, the lefties are smart, right? So take the Hunter laptop thing, right? When you had 40 or so Intel operatives all going, oh, it looks like the Hunter laptop is Russia disinformation, right? But they didn't say that absolutely. So now, of course, Biden did in the debate. So, I mean, the damage gets done, but in a court of law, can you take those 40 Intel people to court for saying something that's
Yeah.
yes, right?
It's a wild question. I guess I have to ask it, though. Is there any connection from your research, Arabella, to what we're now seeing as an uncovering of a coup inside America?
Well, Arabella doesn't get too involved in foreign policy typically. So they're much more about domestic policy. So
Okay.
I don't know that we're going to see a lot of ties there. However, the broader left wing nonprofit world, we shall see. There may well be folks there who are operating.
If they're continuing to fund left-wing candidates and organizations through nonprofit organizations which are funded by their foundations, and they continue to lose, something's happened here. It appears that the message is out. They're spending a lot of money and they're not winning. What's your take?
Well, the one thing I'd warn you is there is a whole lot more money where that came from, right?
Okay.
They have so much, the left has so much more money of every type than the conservative side. So, and the one thing I admire them for is that they don't give up. They can have a crushing defeat. They'll get right back up the next day. I would blame our side. We're not nearly as good about that.
Yeah.
And by the way, T.S. Eliot was right. The war is God's problem. For you and me, God's put us somewhere on the battlefield to fight.
Yeah.
And our job is to do work and fight where the Lord's placed us. And who wins the war is up to him.
No.
And by the way, the other thing T.S. Eliot said is, as long as one man will still fight, the war is not over.
Yeah. Beautifully said. Well said. Do you think in time there'll be an investigation from foundation money to 501c4s?
Well, there is some of that. There's not a lot of that because that's very legally dicey, right? The nonprofit world's so complex, you can't easily say, like, you simply can't do that. On the other hand, you're taking risks if you're doing that. I certainly have been briefing people within the administration and on Capitol Hill about abuses related to that sort of thing that we see. So I'm hopeful that during these 4 years, there will in fact be some serious investigations, and maybe somebody will finally be held accountable.
What do you think of the IRS lifting? Now, that it hasn't been codified in Congress, but the IRS said they're not going to investigate nonprofit 501c organizations that give political endorsements, i.e. pastors from a pulpit.
Well, there's a really ugly history behind that. The law involved is called the Johnson Amendment,
right,
and that's
right.
for Lyndon Baines Johnson.
Right.
He had a race back in Texas before he became president for a congressional race, and a local church, who were obviously very wise, they were going after him hammer and claw because he was such a corrupt, nasty piece of work. And he was furious. He won. He beat them, but he was furious that they landed those blows on him. So he's the one who got that
Right.
little tidbit of law created. So that's not a very wholesome thing. I mean, on the one hand, I don't want churches to turn into political parties. But on the other hand, if a pastor, a priest, a rabbi wants to stand up in the pulpit and say, hey, this guy here is a thoroughly corrupt person opposed to the Judeo-Christian moral law, I think that pastor, priest, or rabbi ought to be able to stand up and say that.
Isn't that free speech?
It is in my book.
Okay, so to my point, though, even though the IRS is saying something, it's not codified in law. Is this a trap?
Well, I don't think it's a trap Now, whether it might be down the road, possibly, although I'll tell you, I used to work with the wonderful folks at Becket Fund for Religious Liberty.
Oh,
And they, for years, have said, if you are a clergyman and you're in a pulpit and you say something that the IRS comes after you for, we will defend you for free. But you know what? They never had anybody take them up on that because nobody was getting, the IRS was not throwing people into court for this. And the view of the much smarter folks at Becket than their view was that the IRS was scared to go to court because they knew they would almost certainly lose
yeah.
on First Amendment grounds.
Well, I sit on a couple of committees, some of them national. I'd like to see the Johnson Amendment repealed. I think that would be the safest thing, so that thing goes.
No, I agree. I mean, it should be clear in law, and you could have restraints. So what the IRS has said has restraints, right? That doesn't mean that you can take your megachurch and turn it into the local, megachurch party for your town.
No, and I think, I'm really concerned about that aspect of it because there are some churches out there that are motivated by other things, not really the gospel.
All have sinned and come short of the glory of God, right? We all know that there's temptation,
right.
And we all succumb to temptation sometimes. So there should be reasonable guardrails.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a clergyman should be able to stand up in the pulpit and speak the truth in love. Speak the truth in love.
You are fascinating. Can we get you back?
Absolutely, anytime.
All right, let me say to our viewers and listeners, check out Scott's website, capitalresearch.org, and I think you'll find the book Arabella to be a fascinating read. It probably will just clarify some suspicions that you've always had. It's called Arabella, the Dark Money Network of Leftist Billionaires Secretly Transforming America. Until God puts his finger on the scale. Scott, thank you for your time. God bless you, friend. Let's stay connected.
Thanks so much. Look forward to the next time.
Okay.